From rebellious schoolboy to the man who saved Western civilization, discover the extraordinary life of Winston Churchill. Witness how a political outcast became Britain's greatest wartime leader. This is the incredible story of courage, controversy, and the words that inspired a nation in its darkest hour. Prepare for an epic journey through one of history's most fascinating lives.
Biographical, Winston Churchill in the darkest hour of Britain's history, when Nazi bombs rained down on London and invasion seemed imminent, one man's voice echoed through the chaos with defiant determination: "We shall never surrender." This was Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, perhaps the most complex, controversial, and captivating figure in modern British history. His life story reads like an epic novel filled with military adventures, political scandals, literary triumphs, and moments of both spectacular failure and world-changing success. Born on November 30, 1874, at Blenheim Palace, Churchill entered the world with aristocratic privilege but also with the burden of living up to an illustrious family name. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a prominent conservative politician, while his mother, Jenny Jerome, was a beautiful American socialite who brought glamour and ambition to the Churchill lineage. Yet young Winston's relationship with his parents was distant and formal, typical of Victorian upper-class families, leaving him to find affection and guidance from his beloved nanny, Mrs. Everest. Churchill's early years revealed the contradictions that would define his entire life. At Harrow School, he was simultaneously brilliant and rebellious, showing exceptional talent in history and English while consistently ranking near the bottom of his class in mathematics and classics. His teachers described him as argumentative, attention-seeking, and impossibly stubborn, qualities that would later make him both a political pariah and a wartime savior. His famous lisp and slight stutter only added to his determination to master the art of public speaking, spending hours practicing in front of mirrors and developing the rhetorical skills that would eventually inspire a nation. After barely graduating from the Royal Military College at Sandhurst, Churchill embarked on a military career that seemed designed for adventure novels rather than real life. As a young cavalry officer with the 4th Queen's Own Hussars, he sought action wherever he could find it, combining his military duties with war correspondence to fund his expensive lifestyle. His first taste of combat came in Cuba in 1895, where he reported on the Spanish efforts to suppress Cuban independence. This experience ignited his lifelong fascination with warfare and his belief that he was destined for greatness. Churchill's early military adventures took him to the northwest frontier of India, where he participated in the Malakand Field Force campaign against Pashtun tribes. His dispatches from this conflict became his first book, The Story of the Malakand Field Force, establishing him as both a military hero and a talented writer. But it was his experiences during the Second Boer War in South Africa that truly launched his fame. Captured while working as a war correspondent, Churchill executed a daring escape from a prisoner of war camp in Pretoria, traveling 300 miles through enemy territory to reach safety. The story of his escape made headlines across the British Empire and established the young Churchill as a household name. Riding the wave of his military fame, Churchill entered politics in 1900 as a Conservative Member of Parliament for Oldham. However, his political career began with immediate controversy when he dramatically switched parties in 1904, crossing the floor to join the Liberal Party over disagreements about free trade. This move, seen by many as opportunistic betrayal, would haunt him for years and established his reputation as a political maverick who put principle before party loyalty. As a Liberal minister, Churchill championed progressive social reforms that seemed to contradict his aristocratic background. He helped establish unemployment insurance, labor exchanges, and minimum wage legislation for certain industries. His work with Lloyd George on the People's Budget of 1909 marked him as a radical reformer willing to challenge the established order. Yet even in these early years, his colleagues noted his immense ambition, his tendency to dominate conversations, and his absolute conviction that he was destined to play a crucial role in British history. World War I brought Churchill his first taste of real power and his first major political disaster. As First Lord of the Admiralty, he was instrumental in preparing the Royal Navy for conflict and played a key role in the early naval war. However, his enthusiastic support for the disastrous Dardanelles campaign in 1915, which aimed to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war by forcing the Dardanelles Strait, ended in catastrophic failure. The campaign cost hundreds of thousands of Allied lives and Churchill's political career. Forced to resign in disgrace, he briefly served as a battalion commander on the Western Front, seeking redemption in the trenches where so many of his generation died. The interwar years saw Churchill in the political wilderness, switching back to the Conservative Party and serving as Chancellor of the Exchequer from 1924 to 1929. His decision to return Britain to the gold standard at pre-war parity proved economically disastrous, contributing to deflation and unemployment. During this period, he also took controversial positions on Indian independence, opposing any move toward self-governance and earning criticism for his outdated imperial attitudes. Many considered his political career finished, viewing him as a relic of a bygone era, but Churchill's finest hour was yet to come. Throughout the 1930s, while most British politicians pursued appeasement with Nazi Germany, Churchill stood virtually alone in warning about the growing threat of Adolf Hitler. His speeches in Parliament, often delivered to half-empty chambers, proved prophetically accurate as he described the Nazi rearmament program and the dangers of appeasement. Colleagues dismissed him as a warmonger, but Churchill understood better than anyone that Britain was sleepwalking toward catastrophe when World War II erupted in September 1939. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain reluctantly brought Churchill back into government as First Lord of the Admiralty. The signal sent to the Royal Navy was simply, "Winston is back." His energy and determination immediately reinvigorated Britain's war effort, but it was the disastrous Norway campaign in early 1940 that finally brought down Chamberlain's government and elevated Churchill to the position he had coveted his entire life, Prime Minister. Churchill became Prime Minister on May 10, 1940, the same day that Hitler launched his devastating offensive against France and the Low Countries. Britain's situation could hardly have been more desperate. Within weeks, France had fallen, the British Expeditionary Force had been evacuated from Dunkirk, and Britain stood alone against the Nazi war machine. Many in his own government favoured negotiating peace terms with Hitler, but Churchill refused to consider surrender under any circumstances. It was during these dark days that Churchill's greatest gift emerged, his ability to inspire through words. His speeches during the summer of 1940 remain among the greatest examples of wartime oratory in history. "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender," he declared to Parliament and the world. His words gave voice to British defiance and provided hope when hope seemed impossible. The Battle of Britain tested Churchill's resolve like nothing before. As German bombers attacked British cities night after night during the Blitz, Churchill walked among the ruins, his presence providing comfort to ordinary Britons facing extraordinary hardship. His famous V4 victory gesture and his willingness to share the dangers faced by his people created an unbreakable bond between leader and nation. He understood instinctively that morale was as important as military hardware in determining the war's outcome. Churchill's strategic vision extended far beyond Britain's immediate survival. He courted American support tirelessly, developing a crucial partnership with President Franklin Roosevelt through their Atlantic Charter meeting and constant correspondence. He also made the difficult decision to ally with Stalin's Soviet Union, famously declaring that if Hitler invaded hell, he would at least make a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons. These alliances, forged through Churchill's personal diplomacy, created the Grand Alliance that would ultimately defeat Nazi Germany. As the war progressed, Churchill faced increasingly difficult decisions that revealed both his strengths and limitations as a leader. His interference in military operations sometimes frustrated his generals, and his romantic attachment to the British Empire put him at odds with American plans for the post-war world. The controversial bombing of Dresden, the Bengal famine, and his opposition to Indian independence showed the darker aspects of his leadership. Yet his unwavering commitment to total victory over fascism never wavered, even when the cost seemed unbearable. Victory in Europe in May 1945 should have been Churchill's moment of ultimate triumph, but British voters had other ideas. In the general election of July 1945, they decisively rejected Churchill and the Conservative Party, choosing instead Clement Attlee's Labour Party and its promise of social reform. Churchill was devastated by this rejection, unable to understand how the British people could dismiss the man who had saved them from Nazi tyranny. His wife Clementine famously suggested that the defeat might be a blessing in disguise, to which Churchill replied, "If it is, it's very well disguised." The post-war years brought new challenges and controversies. Churchill coined the phrase Iron Curtain to describe Soviet dominance in Eastern Europe and was among the first to recognize the threat posed by communist expansion. His 1946 speech in Fulton, Missouri, helped launch the Cold War by calling for Anglo-American cooperation against Soviet aggression. He also championed European unity, advocating for what would eventually become the European Union, though he always envisioned Britain playing a supportive rather than integral role. Churchill's return to power as Prime Minister from 1951 to 1955 was less triumphant than many had hoped. Age and failing health limited his effectiveness, and he struggled to adapt to a world where British power was clearly declining. His attempts to maintain Britain's global influence while managing the end of empire proved increasingly difficult. The Suez Crisis of 1956, which occurred just after his final retirement, demonstrated how dramatically the world had changed since his wartime leadership, yet Churchill's later years also brought recognition of his extraordinary contributions to literature and history. His 6-volume memoir The Second World War won him the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953, cementing his reputation as one of the greatest writers of his generation. His historical works, including his 4-volume The History of the English-Speaking Peoples, showed his deep understanding of the forces that shaped modern civilization. He proved that a life of action could also be a life of the mind. Churchill's final years were marked by increasing frailty and withdrawal from public life. His last major public appearance was at the state funeral of President Kennedy in 1963, where the old warrior paid his respects to a young leader whose life had been cut short. Churchill himself died on January 24, 1965, exactly 70 years to the day after his father's death. His state funeral was the largest gathering of world leaders in British history, a fitting tribute to the man who had saved Western civilization. Winston Churchill's legacy defies simple categorization. He was simultaneously a product of Victorian imperialism and a champion of democracy, a military adventurer and a literary genius, a political outcast and a wartime savior. His flaws were as large as his virtues. His drinking, his debts, his prejudices, and his ego all contributed to a complex personality that both inspired and infuriated those around him. Yet when Britain needed him most, when civilization itself hung in the balance, Churchill provided the leadership that made all the difference. The man who once declared, "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat," gave far more than that. He offered hope when hope seemed lost, courage when courage seemed impossible, and leadership when leadership was desperately needed. His life proves that individual character can indeed shape history, that words can move mountains, and that sometimes one person really can make all the difference. In an age of compromise and calculation, Churchill's unwavering commitment to principle and his absolute refusal to surrender remain as relevant today as they were in 1940.
Churchill's legacy reminds us that leadership means standing firm when others waver, speaking truth when others stay silent. His life proves that one person can change the course of history. If this epic story inspired you, subscribe for more incredible biographies of history's game changers, like If You Believe in the Power of Never Surrendering. Which Churchill moment moved you most?